Right. Okay. You guys ready to get started? Sorry about that delay. Not ready? Okay. Cool. Okay, so I want to talk to you guys today about Google Apps for Education. In particular, what we're doing here in New Zealand, why I'm here. There was some confusion about where I'm from, so I just want to clarify that. I am from San Francisco, California. I live in Australia, and I spend a lot of time in this part of the world. Because I live in Australia, I spend a lot of time in New Zealand as well. So I look after our education business here. By show of hands, who here uses Google Apps at your school? Everybody. Great. All right, we can skip through the first part of the presentation. And also, who here is a teacher versus potentially a principal or an IT director? Teachers? Okay, I don't think I phrased that the best way. Teachers. All right. Principals? And both. Okay. So, in terms of Google Apps usage, this is going to be relatively informal. It'd be nice to have some dialogue as we go through this. Are all of your students using it? Do they have accounts? Everyone's? Okay, cool. So, what we're going to talk about then, it's very handy talking to people that are already using these tools because we have the same sort of set of vocabulary. One of the things about the presentation you just heard was about the Chromebook. And for those of you, if this is your first time seeing it or trying to understand more about it, you might be wondering, okay, it has some hardware attributes that might add value in your classroom, and it's durable, and it has some things. But the thing that wasn't discussed that actually matters most is how it integrates with Google Apps. If your school is already using Google Apps and your students are using Google Docs to do things like web-based word processing, then it makes potentially a lot of sense, whether your school is buying devices for your students or you're doing BYOD, to have a device that's built and optimized for that experience. So I'm going to run through sort of what that looks like, but this isn't a sales pitch at all. And what we want to do, since you're already using the product, is to let you know what we're thinking about doing in New Zealand and get your feedback as to sort of how we can help your schools more. Specifically, there was a question about professional development, and I thought the answer, there's just so much more to the answer than forums and iterative sort of feedback processes. There's a lot of stuff Google is doing to make the lives of teachers and schools and students in New Zealand better, aligned with what we have and how we can help. So that's what I mostly want to spend my time talking about. First and foremost, for those of you using Google Apps for having your student email and word processing, etc., you already know that the internet is an increasingly powerful tool to get stuff done and to share and to collaborate and communicate. One of the things we're really starting to see, and I don't like generally telling educators about trends we observe because we like to hear from educators about trends you guys see in your own classrooms, is about the internet becoming more robust for day-to-day research, communication, and in particular around application usage. The web is growing and it's expanding, and the amount of resources, educational resources that are available on the internet is only getting bigger. And this is sort of an exciting thing because the web used to be about browsers. It used to be like, are you using Firefox or Internet Explorer or Safari or Chrome? And in fact, now it's more of a binary question. Are you using the internet or are you not? You know, I often think about growing up where I went to school in California. It was, does that app work on Windows or does it work on Mac OS or does it work on Linux or does it work on a tablet or whatever? But if you think about the smartphones you have in your hands or in your pockets or the tablets you have in your hands or the computers, because there's pretty much every type of device here, really it becomes a question of, does that device connect to the internet? And if so, how's the internet being used? And that's something that we care deeply about. If you think about what you can do online today, in your classrooms and as individuals, you know that the internet is playing a greater and greater role. For those of you who are teaching and potentially principals at the same time, if you think about the classroom behavior, who here is using Khan Academy? Are you guys using Khan Academy at all? Some. It's a great example, and I talk about it over and over, of the power of multimedia videos to change the way people learn. You know, I think about when I was in school, and this is, I'm sure you have students that this resonates with, we were given basically one or two textbooks, and that was it. That was as much as you could pretty much learn on that given subject. If you read the books, you were basically done with the class. And it was sort of a blessing and a curse that I was able to learn things really quickly. And so after the first week or two of the term, I was done. And that caused a whole bunch of other problems for me and other students as I was distracted, etc. But had we had something like Khan Academy, I could have gone 10x deeper on any given subject that I thought I had mastered, when in fact it was a very superficial understanding. Likewise, on subjects that I struggled with, I could have gone deeper, I could have watched videos at home or over the weekends to get caught up on, etc. So if you think about what the web can do in the classroom, it can actually change learning outcomes. And that's something that we're really excited about, and it's something we see in our own sort of day-to-day when we reflect on our own educational upbringing, and we hear from schools saying, yeah, this stuff really does matter, and it happens to be free and extremely impactful. We care about that. The internet, and by deduction, Google Apps, can do a variety of things. And for those of you who are using this and have been using it for a while, hopefully you can already start to see some of these trends about extending learning beyond the classroom. What does it mean to have a classroom that goes from 9 to 3, but learning can happen anytime, anywhere? These are sort of powerful trends, right? We want to get this right. These trends are only becoming more prevalent. They're not going away. So understanding how to harness these trends, especially when it comes to things like pedagogy and curriculum integration, pretty important stuff. Of course, learning on an unlimited set of topics, right? If you think about what the internet is, it's basically a database, and it's a database that's expanding and only getting filled with more information. So you can get nearly 1/3 of a billion results in 1/3 of a second on something like the solar system. So it's not a question of, is there enough information? Is there enough data? It's how do you leverage that as a teacher to help people learn, right? How do you find the relevant content that actually adds value for whatever subject or course that you're trying to teach your students? And then, of course, the importance around anytime, anywhere learning. This is a trend we're seeing in New Zealand sort of pick up at alarming rates, is around BYOD. And we've seen schools implement BYOD poorly in other countries. I personally have seen it myself when I travel around this part of the world, and also coming from the US, where in many states the educational system is to say broken would be sort of an overstatement. There's a lot of fundamental challenges with education systems in the US, and many of them have implemented BYOD. So we think we can, at a very minimum, take some of the learnings from other schools that have struggled with BYOD approaches and at least let people know, hey, here's some of the pitfalls that other schools experience so that maybe you can avoid similar things. Of course, learning anytime, anywhere is extremely important, and BYOD is part of that. But making sure that it's done in sort of a thoughtful way and understanding the shortcomings as well is something we care about. I love the fact that the internet can engage more stakeholders in a community. Families can get more involved. You know, here in Auckland, at Point England, I spend a lot of time with Russell and Dorothy. I'm sure many of you know them. What they've been able to do at a community level around not only Google Apps, but also what the web can do for learning outcomes and engaging different stakeholders. That stuff is phenomenally impactful, and it's something that only the internet, as sort of a democratic system, could actually provide. And I say democratic in the sense that it can involve all sorts of people. And then, of course, sharing. And then this is actually a blog from Point England, from one of their students, about what does it mean to create a web presence, right? For those of you that are using blogs as part of the curriculum around Google Apps and Google Docs, etc., people often think that creating blogs is good because it's around content creation. But it's actually more than that. It's about learning how to use sort of a 21st century technology, how to be a good steward of information, and then also what does it mean to have a web portfolio, sort of a digital footprint as you leave your classroom. Teachers are often surprised by this. They think, blogs are great for creating content and for helping our students publish their work. And that's very valuable for some subset of reasons. But then when you sort of tell them, you know what, this will actually also be very valuable as your student gets older and they go to university or they apply for their first job, etc. Google, for example, spends a lot of time looking at the web presence that people have to understand their footprint and what they've done as part of our hiring process. And that's not just Google, that's many other companies as well. They want to see, hey, what have you created? Where's your track record? And that track record these days is more and more kept online. What videos have you edited and published on YouTube? What blogs have you published? What writing samples have you created, etc.? So not only do these tools add value in the day-to-day learning and learning outcomes in the classroom, but they also add value beyond that, beyond the classroom when your students leave. We think that's important. Let's transition a little bit. That first part, I sort of went through quickly because you most likely already just understand that intuitively because you're using these products. Let's talk a little bit about devices. I thought the first presentation that hopped right into Chromebooks might have been a little bit jarring in the sense that, have all of you guys heard of a Chromebook or seen a Chromebook coming into today? One of the things about that sort of earlier presentation was went right to the hardware. And it's sort of like, this is what the hardware can do and why it matters. I want to take a step back and look at some of the design principles that goes into a computer that schools can use and why that actually can help with things like learning outcomes, engagement, etc. So more about how it can integrate with the pedagogy, the culture, the community, etc., and less about sort of the physical aspects of the device. Ideally, this is sort of my opinion, but I think many of my colleagues share this as well, a really good computer in the classroom should almost be invisible, right? No one says this is a good pencil or a bad pencil. They just say, this pencil enables me to write. And that's sort of our dream here with Chromebooks, is that it's computers that are so simple and so easy to use that people don't talk about them. They use them to get online, to get to the tools and the platform and the word processing and the sharing and the collaboration, etc., that actually matters for their learning. That's sort of the fundamental goal that we're trying to bring to New Zealand, and that's why I'm on this team. So, there's a presentation earlier about the Lenovo Chromebook. There's other companies that make Chromebooks. The Lenovo Chromebook definitely is the most durable. Point England has roughly 700 of the Samsung devices. Acer has a Chromebook. The idea, again, is not to spend time talking about the physical device. It's to spend time about what does the device enable you to do. And all of these devices have good batteries. They start immediately. They're easy to manage. And most importantly, when you open them up, you're online to get to those tools that you want to use anyway. Let me take a step back and explain a little bit about sort of how we got here. People are often curious, first of all, how did I end up on the education team at Google? The second thing is, what is Google doing in New Zealand? Like, why am I here today? And the third thing is sort of, why do we have a product that behaves the way it does? Why do we care so deeply about proper internet usage and getting people to know how to use web-based tools? Let me try to answer those questions for you. The first is, when I graduated high school, I enrolled in my local university. I went to Berkeley, which is in the Bay Area. And my parents gave me a computer. And it was a Windows Dell machine. And it worked great the day I got it. And it slowly started to get worse, right? I'm sure you can all think about old netbooks you have, etc. And it was really sort of a crummy experience. And by the time I was a senior 4 years later, it took about 10 minutes for my device to start. And so I thought, okay, I'm pretty clever, right? I'm going to set my first alarm in the morning, but I'm going to have my computer right by my bed, so I don't actually need to get out of bed. I could just press the power button. And then 10 minutes later, I'd have my snooze alarm go off, and that's when I knew my computer was ready for me. And all I wanted to do was get online. So then I'd click on the internet icon, and I was good to go. If you think about that experience, surely you've had an analogous one or a similar one with your computers as they've gotten slower and older and worse. But it changed how I actually led my life to some extent. And it had a negative impact on my mornings. And if you multiply that sort of negative experience and that bad computing experience times all the students in a classroom, and all of the classrooms in a school, and all of the schools in a community, and all the communities in the North Island, etc., it can actually really start to change the educational footprint and outcomes if you aggregate all of that times the schools and students and what they're experiencing. And I thought to myself, I had a bad experience, but if you multiply that bad experience times thousands of people, it becomes an unacceptable one. And so I felt pretty passionately that I wanted to work on a team and I wanted to work on creating products that could help solve this problem for other students. So we actually sat down with educators, with principals. We had sort of a big symposium and said, what matters in your classroom? And there was basically 3 buckets of things that educators told us, hey, this matters. If you're going to build a computer and you want that computer to be used in schools, then get 3 things absolutely 100% right, and get them right all of the time. The first was around speed. Have devices that are really fast, that just work immediately, that have good batteries. The second thing was around security. Have devices that are extremely secure, no viruses. We don't want to deal with that. It creates headaches. And the third thing were devices that are very simple. A lot of schools were telling us, hey, we're buying computers that can do A through Z, but we're only doing A, B, and C for our daily usage in the classroom. Get rid of all of the other aspects of the computer that slow it down or get in the way or cause distractions. Focus on the thing that our students actually use computers for, which was internet browsing. And the last thing was around manageability. School said, look, we're spending a lot of time, a lot of money. Our IT staffs are growing, or we have to bring in outside consultants. The day-to-day operation, the day-to-day management of computers has become far too complex. And so the feedback we got is, look, if you can solve problems around speed, simplicity, security, and management, that will add a lot of value so that our teachers can get back to teaching, our principals can get back to leading, and we can all get out of the business of managing ICT pain points in the classroom. So let me talk a little bit about some of the attributes that Chromebooks have. And this is true across all of the devices, so it really comes down to personal preference when you're evaluating these things, that actually show that we listen to the feedback of educators to build into our sort of core design principles to make it easier for your students to use computers. All right, so the first one, of course, is speed. This device goes from off to on in under 10 seconds. That's a cool little statistic, but when you think about what that looks like in the classroom, if you're a teacher, you can have students shut the lid of their device and then open it up immediately and they're back online. You don't have computers that when you shut them, it could take 3 minutes or 6 minutes for them to start again. That can actually change the frustration levels, the energy, the focus, etc. in the classroom. These things actually really matter. The other thing is around battery. Part of speed is, hey, we get feedback from schools saying our laptops are supposed to be mobile and agile, but they act like desktops because they need to be plugged into the wall and the cord is only 1 or 2 meters long. So we built a device with a great battery life so that it can last all day. You don't have to think about it. Again, these things matter from a student's perspective. The next thing, the sort of general buckets are on simplicity. Schools are telling us it just becomes far too complicated to manage and roll out a fleet of computers. You have to go device by device by device to update them. You have to spend part of the summer re-imaging them. Some of them get different versions of different operating systems. The operating systems get fragmented or viruses. They have different software versions. In the end of the day, if you add up all of those sort of nagging pain points or challenges, again, it starts to impact classroom outcomes. One student opens a computer one day and it's slightly different than their colleague next to them. We wanted to build a computer that would take that off the sort of map. You log into a Chromebook with your student's username and password for their Google Apps account, and then all of the settings that you as a teacher or an IT leader, etc., have set apply to that student. So the devices then become very shareable because anybody here in this room could log into my Chromebook. But the reverse is not true, right? You never let me log into your personal computer or your tablet because it's your data and your information. So the model of computing changes. So you have devices that are easy to share, easy to use, and are tied to your Google Apps username and password. So it's very simple. The last thing around simplicity is that the fact that these devices update themselves. For those of you who use Google Docs every day, for example, you know that there's more features in Google Docs today than there were a year ago, right? The same is true with Chrome. And just like with Google Docs, we update the product, we improve it, we make it better. You go to sleep at night, you come to work the next day, and maybe there's more fonts, or maybe it loads a little bit faster, or maybe it works offline. Whatever feature set that is, there's constant improvement from Google to make the product better. And the same is true with Chrome. Roughly every 6 weeks, we update Chrome across the world, and every Chromebook updates itself automatically over the air. So the analogy I like to give people is it's sort of like if you're driving a car. A PC, or a tablet to some extent, is great on day one, and it slowly starts to depreciate. And you need to get new air in your tires, or get an oil change, or a new engine as time goes on. A Chromebook does that. It's like you park your car in the garage at night, you go into your house, you have dinner and go to bed, and the next day you wake up, you turn on your car, you have a brand new engine. And you haven't had to think about it, You haven't had to pay for it. You haven't had to do it. It automatically does it itself.
Yes, please.
Yes, please. Thank you. So usually people clap and they're like, oh my God, this is going to change like everything. And frankly, the schools that have rolled out Chromebooks where the devices update themselves as they all do, it has profound ramifications for their IT teams, teacher frustration levels, students, etc. Because the devices are always up to date. It's like a brand new computer every time it updates. And that has ramifications, of course. There are no viruses, there's no malware, and the computer does the work behind the scenes, so again, you don't have to do it. That's pretty transformative computing stuff. Sometimes I tell this to people and they're like, cool, well we just expect Google like to do the work behind the scenes, right? This is different than any other computer in the world today. This greatly changes how you have to manage computers. There's a lot of benefits of a computer that updates itself so that you don't have to do it. The last thing is around security. Tied to simplicity, tied to the speed, is the fact that these devices, with the auto-updating, remain virus-free. You don't have to install antivirus software. The applications that the device uses, the web-based applications, update themselves. There's a lot of security benefits from using this model of computing as well.
Can I just ask,
Yeah.
virus-free, that is incredible.
Yeah.
How is that possible? There must be, I don't know how many people in the world would actually look at that as a challenge
Yeah.
to take it.
So look, in New Zealand it's a little bit different, but how many schools have to purchase antivirus software at an individual level and install the licenses and the copies? And from what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, in New Zealand, schools get antivirus software through all of government at discounted rates or free. So anyway, to make a long story short, at a technical level, there's things that the Chrome operating system is built around and does that prevents the local downloading of malicious information and content, etc., malware. So it can't actually physically get a virus. You couldn't install a virus on here if you tried. The second thing is because the device is always updating itself, the troubleshooting of this computer, if something does go wrong, is pushing the power button and restarting it. And 10 seconds later, it starts again. I understand you come from the IT side of the world. I'm happy to speak with you at a technical level about what's going on. But just from a high level, for the teachers here who might not be interested in, say, like, what at a computer science level is actually occurring, the device can't get a virus. It can't download malware. And troubleshooting it is as easy as pressing the power button and rebooting it, and 10 seconds later, it starts. There's things that it does behind the scenes that at some point in the future, every type of computer ever made going forward will copy what this does. I actually have some good friends at Google that have patents on some of the things around Chromebooks about how it updates itself. And they were granted patents because they were the first ones to build a computer architecture like this. And again, if you think about a car, it's like, why wouldn't a car get a new engine every time you park it in the garage once a month, update itself, right? Well, with a car, you can't because it's a massive, engines are heavy and they have to be installed, etc. But to extrapolate that metaphor on a computer, an operating system can be delivered. It can be pushed over the air to a computer. It's not a heavy, big thing, right? It's a piece of software. And so why can't software be sent over the internet to a computer that calls it? And in fact, that's what Google does with these computers. And the same thing works with security, etc. So there's some design principles here behind the scenes that have profound ramifications from an IT department, how they spend their time and how they work. Because we do a lot of the things that you have to do today. We do it for free, behind the scenes. You don't have to think about it again.
Is an operating system put on standard computers, or does it have to be on a Chromebook?
It has to be on a Chromebook because there's physical things about this computer that are tied to the model of how it updates itself and some of its security, etc. Yeah?
And that said, though, you can install a Linux operating system to run alongside
Yep.
the Chrome operating system. So
Yeah.
could there be certain applications that you
Absolutely.
can run and install, and you could have a dual boot up. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. And
But-
Google's quite happy with that.
In the end of the day, conceptually, we want schools and students to have a really, really great experience using Google Apps and the internet to learn and to grow intellectually and expand the academic horizons. Schools come to us and say, you know what? We need to do 2 operating systems on 1 computer. Sure. We support schools. And one of the things that I want to answer that question sort of in the most candid manner I can. A lot of organizations say, we make product A, B, and C. And those products are so great for the following reasons, you should buy them today. Our approach is quite different. We think that the internet and the web is growing and expanding and becoming increasingly relevant for how people learn and live and engage with information in the world. As a result of that trend, we are uniquely positioned to build technology that solves some of the common pain points around computation and computers. It just so happens that we have a Chromebook, which is built and optimized for the internet and a simple, easy-to-use computing experience. If a school believes that the web and Google Apps is front and center for how their students learn and how they want to teach, then we have a product that can help with that. But we don't want to say we have a product that can do A, B, C, and D, and therefore you should buy it today. It's quite a different approach. We really believe that these devices solve in one fell swoop a lot of the pain points that prevent teachers from focusing on teaching, students from focusing on learning. And that's what we're so passionate about. All right, so just to review, you got speed, simplicity, security built in. And then the last thing is around manageability. Point England, great example down the road. What does it mean to manage computers at scale? Whether the schools buy them and then give them to students, or parents buy them on behalf of their students in BYOD, what does it mean to manage a computer experience? Well, with Chromebooks, the devices can be managed. So this is a screenshot of my domain that's using Google Apps. And within that, there's a management layer for Chromebooks. And what you can do is you can control the computer remotely. You can control who can log into it, what applications they see when the device starts. You can force a proxy if you want to have your students connect through your school's rules. And this doesn't matter if the device is on campus or at home or wherever it is in the world, it'll always connect through that proxy. You can set a variety of rules and controls and customizations based on your school's needs and on the grade level in the class, etc., so that you can customize the end-to-end computing experience. So if you think about what Google Apps is, it's a platform by which you can do, real-time collaboration and work, etc. If you think about what a Chromebook is, it's essentially a portal into that world in a manner that's easy to use, simple, can be managed, is secure, virus-free, and aligned with the web as sort of the front and center platform that schools are using in the classroom. We know it's not easy. A lot of schools come to us and they say, we're using Google Apps, or we see that the internet is extremely important, but we are doing BYOD, or we don't have the funds, or we have old computers. There's a variety of challenges that schools have to adopting technology. We've heard, every end of the spectrum for why it's a challenge. We're here to help. Google cares deeply about the success of students in learning, not only because it matters today for learning outcomes, but also if you think about the future generation of employees that at some point Google will want to hire and understanding how to use technology successfully. These things matter to us as a company. They matter to us from a cultural perspective. Every single person at Google pretty much has a deep love of academics and at some point in their life did very well academically. And it's something that we can all relate to when you think about our own computing experiences, like mine. When my computer started to get worse over time, it impacted my life. And so we're in a position to help solve that problem for other people. And that's what we care deeply about. So there's my email. And I think now it'd be great just to do a little bit of Q&A, a little bit of dialogue, because you guys have been spoken at for so long. I'd love to hear your feedback and thoughts now that you know a little bit about what we're doing and why we're here in New Zealand.